What's going on, friends? Welcome back to another New World video. Today I want to talk about one of my favorite builds in New World for tanking, and tanking PvE in particular. A lot of you guys may not be aware, but this box down here, it says 150 coins, but it actually gives you 1,000 coins right now. So if you do the random button, and then you get an additional 500 coins in here as well. Again, it says 100, but it is a 500. We can pop up some footage of me opening some boxes here. What I'm basically trying to say is if you queue up as a tank for a random dungeon, not only will the queue likely be pretty quickly, I think if you queue up as a damage, it takes a long time, but queuing up as a tank, I'm rarely waiting more than a minute to find a queue pop. Let's just see how long it takes here, actually. There we go. That was 16 seconds. I am going to decline that one. Sorry, guys. But yeah, it is a pretty speedy queue when you queue up as a tank. And like I say, the rewards are definitely there as well. Getting 1,000 gold from the random box and then getting 500 gold for queuing up as a tank. You can get that twice a day, so that's 3,000 gold. And this build just does it with a breeze. Like, there is no challenge at all. So let's walk through exactly what the Greatsword Tank does and why it's so strong. So one of the big reasons why I shifted over to Greatsword Tanking is due to a change that Amazon have made for specifically tanks and also bruisers as well. It's with 300 constitution. Previously, this used to say that you would gain grit when you were performing any melee attacks. So any sort of attack like this, you would have grit. And for those of you who are not aware, grit is when your character glows white, and during that time, you can't be interrupted, you can't be staggered, you can't be stopped. The only thing that's going to affect you is basically a hard stun. So generally you can just get away with doing whatever you want and the enemy can't disrupt you. But now that it only works with heavy attacks, I find that quite often I'm just getting sort of clobbered and shoved around a lot outside of when I have my stone form active. But with the Greatsword Tank, we have the ability that heavy attacks give us grit, and it just so happens that the Greatsword loves to do heavy attacks. And there's one other change that they made as well, which specifically benefits heavy attacks. And that is that all melee weapons, they have this additional text down at the bottom. So just above the PvP balancing, it says Taunt Gem compatible, heavy attacks with a Greatsword attached with a Carnelian Gem taunt for 0.5 seconds. So any heavy attack taunts the enemy, so you don't need to have an ability to taunt. If you want to get the enemy to guarantee attack you, you just have to hit them with a heavy attack. And like I say, there is no weapon in the game that loves to do heavy attacks more than the Greatsword. The reason why I say that is because both the Path of Onslaught passive and the Path of Defiance passive both give you a added bonus. So you can see we have Guard Point. It's that sort of third yellow text down there, or fourth yellow text. It says you block incoming attacks while charging heavy attacks. And then we also have Path of Onslaught. It says heavy attacks consume stamina, but you charge 50% faster, basically. So yeah, 10 stamina for a heavy attack, but they charge 50% faster. And then with the ultimates on the Greatsword, we have Undying Defiance, which is healing for 5% of the damage from attacks, or you can heal for 15% if you do it while blocking. And obviously you can be blocking from Guard Point. And then over here, charged heavy attacks give you 10% cooldown reductions. So you've got some choices down here, but effectively, I can demonstrate this. If we go ahead and go into blue mode, you can see whenever I'm doing a heavy, I'm also blocking in front of me. That little blue aura that's appearing, that's me blocking. So I'm blocking and heavy attacking at the same time. And then inversely, when we go into red mode, we heavy attack a lot faster. It uses stamina, and we do take more damage, but I mean, you can really pump out, you know, a lot of damage. You can continuously be taunting and hitting really hard here. And while that's happening, of course, we do have grit, so we can't be interrupted. We're getting a good amount of lifesteal, especially because I'm using a perk called Trenchant Recovery. I'm amplifying that with Blood Drinker, so we really sort of drain the enemy's health pretty fast there and give it back to myself. And of course, every single heavy attack is applying taunt. Just to give a demonstration of this build's power, we could go over and take on this Corrupted Monolith here. This is designed for, recommended players 5, level 65, but I find that this build can kind of solo most of the content that you want to do in the game. So if we just go grab a bunch of enemies over here. Let's take this guy as well. And the way that I typically play it is I go red to just get into the group. Then we taunt with our ability here. And then we just go in and start swinging. And I find that the health bar, it's going to go down, but it goes up pretty quickly as well. You can also use your Roaring Rupture to weaken the enemy, cleanse some debuffs, swing back over to those ranged enemies that you're trying to get to. Again, just hit the taunt. You can use that as a way to get yourself out of trouble. So if you're getting pretty low in health, pressing Calamity Counter basically gives you a reset because you take very little block damage while you're in that mode, and it knocks them back as well. And then you can just keep on swinging, pop the Heart Rune, get back over to any enemies that we want to clump up, immediately back in. it's just got kind of everything. It's got taunts, you're uninterruptible, you can cleanse, you've got an insanely good sort of block taunt thing with the calamity counter here. We've got some movement. We can even, like, you know, if we stay in red mode, we can do some extra damage. You are going to take more damage while you're in this mode, but you can deal a lot more damage as well. It's just a really, really good build, and I've been playing this in mutated dungeons, M1 and M2, through the random queue, like we talked at the start of the video. It's super, super powerful, and pretty easy to pull off as well. So, with a little bit of a demonstration, and now that we understand like the core mechanics of what is making this build so good, it's largely revolved around the fact that they made a change with heavy attacks applying taunts, and the Greatsword loves to do heavy attacks, and 300 con specifically benefits heavy attacks. It's all like a very heavy attack centric build. Let's go into the nitty gritty in terms of perks and weapon mastery and everything else, shall we? So first things first, let's start with the Greatsword. I just found this random Greatsword in Elysian Wilds, I think, but the perks that are important is basically Trenchant Recovery or Trenchant Strikes. Trenchant Strikes looks like, I think it's on the spear actually. Basically says heavy melee attacks deal 23% more damage. Trenchant crits I don't think as good, but anything that says your heavy attacks are like more powerful, so they either give you lifesteal if you want to be a bit more safe, or they do more damage, because doing more damage does contribute to lifesteal. And to really amplify that, we are running Blood Drinker as well. This is the artifact ring. It comes from doing mutated Starstone Barrows, which is currently not in the cycle, but with the way that Amazon have been doing things right now, we just seem to get the same mutations over and over again. So I'm sure Starstone Barrows will be back real soon instead of Ennead or Savage Divide. If you don't have Blood Drinker, you could just run some sort of ring that has leeching on it instead. It wouldn't be anywhere near as powerful. I do think Blood Drinker is kind of needed to make the build here. But if you had Trenchant Recovery and then you just had leeching on the ring, I think you'd still probably find it works. But Blood Drinker I would recommend to have. One other piece of tech that we're using for this build that makes it very exciting is Venom. Now this is the artifact spear, and it's relatively easy to attain. One of the things that's weird about Venom is you need to make a tuning orb. So if I go to my characters section here, and then I go to trade skills, we go to stone cutting. I think it's at like level 50 stone cutting or something. You can make these tuning orbs. Can I find them? Are they in here? Here they are. We found it. It was hiding. Yeah, so 50, you can make a siren tuning orb at the stone cutting station. You can buy the materials to make this off the trading posts. You do need energy core, elemental heart, which require quite a lot of motes, but I don't think it's too expensive, and you might find people just advertising them in chat as well. You take that tuning orb, and then you need to run up to the top of the Spire of Melpomene. You'll be able to enter into the Siren Arena. It will require the key or the tuning orb to enter, and ideally you want to bring a group of 5 as well, but you kill her a few times and you should see Venom drop. And this, I don't, again, like with Blood Drinker, I don't think it's super necessary, but it just really adds into that thing that we're doing with the heavy attacks. It says heavy melee attacks with either weapon cause poison, dealing 15% weapon damage for 5 seconds. So yeah, it's a bit over the top, maybe not completely necessary, but I do think it just really adds into, you know, the heavy attacks kind of doing everything. Now, with this combined, our heavy attacks are applying a dot. They're also doing good damage. They're lowering our cooldowns. They give us grit. They apply taunt, and we can also be blocking, you know, at the same time as well. So, you know, with heavy attack, just doing every single form of like ability in the game all at the same time. Other perks that I'd strongly recommend you pick up here, just basically Enchanted Ward on every single piece of armor. This is something that you'll want to do for every build in PvE, honestly, but Enchanted Ward's such a good perk in PvE. It's also really good in PvP as well, but you just take less damage from light and heavy attacks. This just really amplifies, or reduces rather, the amount of damage you take. I was going to say it amplifies your tankiness, but yeah, just reduces incoming damage. Additional perks would include refreshing or health, and then I also am a big fan of thrust conditioning and slash conditioning as well. It's just basically anything that's going to reduce that incoming damage. The Frigid Dawn armor in particular is really good because it has elemental aversion and enchanted ward. If you had to choose between one or the other, enchanted ward over elemental aversion, but getting both of them is pretty excellent. And for artifacts, I went with Void Darkplate. Your armor is increased by 20%. Again, just I think having more armor is pretty awesome. You could take a few other things. I'm trying to think, like, what else could you rock? The Magnetic Gauntlets for increased crit chance. It wouldn't really benefit you that much, though. There is a little bit of bonuses with critting with the Greatsword. I think we have, what is it called? critical comeback. Yeah, you could be proccing this consistently, I guess, but I would opt to go for Void Dark Plate. This comes from doing mutated barnacles and black powder, which again is not currently in the cycle, but if you get a chance to get into barnacles, I do think this is an excellent artifact for most tank builds, to be honest. Other things that you want to look for this build is an earring that has Despised and Regenerating. These two sort of work together, so you generate more threat and you're regenerating health, and by regenerating health, it's sort of amplifying the threat reduction. Those two perks, I would say, are mandatory. And then finally on your amulet, currently right now I'm using a slash protection amulet. This is mainly just because, you know, in PvP there's hatchets everywhere, but some sort of protection amulet that you particularly find you struggle with is going to be ideal. In the long run, you want to be getting a bunch of different amulets. So when you get a frozen protection amulet, you can use this in Glacial Taunt, for example, or in Frost Mutations. You want to get a thrust protection amulet. You can use this against, like, the first boss of Starstone Barrows. I can't remember her name now. Scylla. She does a lot of thrust damage. Any enemies with spears. You want to get a Void Protection Amulet. You guys get the idea. Getting a sort of different suite of protection amulets and then just slapping them on for whatever fight you're about to go into will help you. But right now, we got a Divine / Protection Empowered Amulet. I find this is pretty good. Empowered could probably be health instead. But yeah, protection amulets are a big deal for tanking, and I think that's sort of a separate video that we would go into that. But the TLDR is Enchanted Ward on the armor, and then refreshing or health, and then conditioning. Those are the things you want to prioritize. Greatsword, I'm just looking for Trenchant Recovery or Trenchant Strikes. And then ideally you want to get Blood Drinker, you want to get Venom, and you want to get Void Dark Plate to sort of round it out. Attributes wise, this is probably no surprise because we've talked about it extensively, but you need to make sure that you are at 300 Constitution, and then after that I would prioritize getting to 150 Dexterity because this says duration to damage over time effects. And obviously you do have a damage over time effect with Venom. Also you have another damage over time effect in the form of a bleed that you can apply with Unflinching Blade. Charging heavy attacks gain crit and inflict bleeding. So you get some extra dot damage over there as well. And then finally 150 strength, just because strength and dexterity, you kind of want to keep them equal to the best of your ability because Greatsword scales equally with both strength and dexterity. So you kind of need to keep these as equal as you can for the most damage. But if you only have a certain amount of stats, prioritize getting to 150 dexterity first. Well, actually, no, very first is 300 con, followed by 150 dex, followed by 150 strength. And then after that, just keep them equal as you get sort of like higher gear score. So once I get like to a 725 gear score earring, I'll have how many extra stats? Let me think about this. Yeah, I'll have 6 extra stats. So I can put 3 into strength and then 3 into dexterity. Well, it wouldn't work that way, it would magnify, but you guys get the idea. 300 con, followed by 150 dex, followed by 150 strength as your priorities. Weapon mastery, we've already shown this screen many times, but it's worth just going over. I like to take the left side passive here just for the cooldown reduction. I find that just being able to continuously land the attacks, because this is what you're going to spend most of the time with the build doing. This is going to lower your cooldown, so you can frequently keep using your taunts and your movement. It just makes the combat sort of flow nicer, so I much prefer to go for the Unrelenting Onslaught. It's a bit awkward because I do want to take 2 abilities on the right side so that we can stay in blue stance more often than we can in red. The best red ability, in my opinion, is Relentless Rush, just because it's an awesome movement ability. It gives you Empower, it can heal you, and it can root the enemies as well. In order to make sure that we can take Unrelenting Onslaught, we do need to take almost every passive over here. I would avoid taking Aggressive Shift, because every time you do a heavy attack, you're now going to move into red stance. And you don't want to be in red stance too often, because you're going to take a lot of extra damage. You take 15% extra damage when you're in red stance, whereas you take 15% less damage, so it's a 30% damage difference between, you know, these 2 different stances. And of course, you can be blocking while you're attacking at the same time in Path of Defiance, which is super awesome. So yeah, we just take all the passives over here that seem important to me. And then on the right side, we don't have many points to spend because we have to spend so many on the left, so I've just picked up the most important passives, which I think are Blade Honing for extra damage, Wary Posture for some extra Fortify, Unflinching Blade for that bleed, and also Perfect Vigilance for more Fortify. And then I opted to go for Calamity Counter. We didn't put any points in here because I don't think either of these are super necessary. Jagged Counter would be nice, to be honest, and so would Critical Calamity, but I think these 2 are more important over here. Cleansing debuffs is huge, and being able to weaken the enemy and become uninterruptible, that's also a pretty big deal as well. So this is a taunt and this is a taunt. You could run Steadfast Strike, but I just think these 2 are a little bit better for PvE. So that's the skill tree there. On the spear, it doesn't really matter. I don't find that I'm using the spear very often at all, but Skewer, Perforate, and Sweep, I think it's just nice if you're going to switch over. What you could do is run Leeching Cyclone on the spear. That would help with your survivability, because Leeching Cyclone, you put the perk actually on the spear itself, so you put Leeching Cyclone on Venom, And then when you switch over, you can use the Cyclone ability and get a huge amount of lifesteal. You could also look to put Enfeebling Skewer on the spear as well. I don't really use the spear that much, to be honest. It's kind of just there to amplify the Greatsword's damage. But if you do want to switch to it and sort of apply some debuffs with Enfeebling Skewer, Perforate, or Bleeding Sweep as well, that would work. Or like I say, Leeching Cyclone. A lot of Spear's abilities are really good, so you can kind of just pick which ones you want. Again, if I was to choose, I would either go for the Enfeebling Skewer perk upgrade and put that there just to put a huge weaken on the enemy, or I would go for Leeching Cyclone so I can switch over to the spear and get a large amount of lifesteal. But you probably don't need that. I think it's a bit overkill considering everything the Greatsword already does. One other thing I want to make you guys aware of is we have put this build up in Discord as well. So we are moving back into doing written builds. So we have a bunch of builds here from the past that we are slowly going through and updating, and we're adding new ones as well, like this Colossus build. This is what I call the Greatsword and Spear build. I did add another variant to this build, which uses the wall. I think in the long run, the sort of ultimate form of this build is going to use Serenity, which is the artifact Greatsword. This thing is just all kinds of bonkers. It has Trenchant Strikes and Trenchant Crits, and you get either Empower or Fortify whatever you attack or block. It's really, 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 really good. But I know that Serenity is going to be out of reach for quite a few players, especially on the new servers, because it only comes from the PvP rewards track, and this is super grindy and arduous, and Amazon needs to reevaluate the whole of this, but that's going to be for a separate video before we start ranting about the PvP rewards track. So with this in mind, I did just include, you know, a sort of more attainable set right now. But in the long run, I do think using the wall and using Serenity, these two sort of combined together do have pretty insane synergy. There is a video if you're interested on how that works. Sword and Shield Greatsword, unethical build immortal while hitting 4,000 damage. This was from Cousin, and it is more, he takes like a PvP approach to it, so if you are interested in seeing how this build would work in PvP, I think it is pretty disgusting. A very good counter to Hatchet and Void Gauntlet right now as well. But like I say, that sort of like the ultimate form of the build is there if you want to check it out and see what it would look like. But you can also just see what we showcased in this video is down at the bottom, which I call the budget version. But honestly, the budget version is still really good. And we go over the examples of where you can get some of the items. So yeah, if you're struggling with any of the items, you want to know where to find them. Like, for example, the Tanglevine Greatsword, which has Trenchant Recovery and Keen, which is very similar to the Greatsword that I showcased in this video. You can go ahead and click on the links, and you can find where the enemies are that drop, you know, the Greatsword that would be good for this build. I think one other thing that I didn't cover is Heart Rune choice, but Stone Form, I think it's just to sort of set it and forget it. It's a nice Heart Rune to get. You get Stone Form by killing Chardis, which is the final boss of Lazarus. You can just do normal Lazarus. If we just go Lazarus Instrumentality, we queue up for normal Lazarus. The final boss is likely going to drop you the blue version of Stone Form, and then you can just upgrade it at the stone cutting table. You do need to make sure it's in your bag, upgrade it to purple, and then upgrade it to legendary, and go for the Stalwart version. But even then, I think that the Stone Form room is kind of, just because of how safe you are with the Greatsword, it's kind of unnecessary. Anyway, I also forgot to mention as well, you can use this build in just normal expeditions. I mean, it's completely overkill, but you do get, again, I think this is another 250 gold here, and this box down here represents 750 gold as well. So by queuing up as a tank for a random expedition, you can get 1,000 gold 3 times a day, and then by queuing up as a tank for a mutated expedition, you can get 1,500 gold 2 times a day, so that's 2 lots of 3,000 gold. So you can get 600 gold by doing random normal expeditions and random mutated expeditions as a tank, 6,000 gold a day, and this build is just excellent for doing that in a timely fashion with a pretty low stress. So yeah, that's going to do it for the builds, friend. Let me know if you guys have any further questions or suggestions or improvements to the build. But this was the Colossus. Again, it's a Greatsword with 300 Constitution, and it uses the passives of the Greatsword to give itself cooldown reduction, to give itself lifesteal, to be taunting, to be blocking at the same time. It just does everything, and I think it's so much fun. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy it. If you want more Baggins, make sure you go ahead and click the subscribe button. If they've got any sort of future builds you would like to see, healer builds, damage builds, PvP, or particular weapons that you're interested in, let me know in the comments down below. We have a lot more build guides coming soon. I think this is probably the most important videos we could be making. But with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Goodbye!